The Volkai did not declare war. They sent an invoice. It arrived as a standard galactic transmission, routed through the Council's diplomatic relay, marked with the gold seal of the Volkai Dominion. Inside was a single document, 12 pages of legal text describing the formal transfer of Earth's asteroid belt, its orbital stations, and 3 of its outer moons to Volkai authority. At the bottom, a line for a human signature, a deadline of 6 hours. Supreme Commander Gareth had written it himself. He was proud of it. His fleet sat at the edge of the Sol system, 400 warships arranged in a crescent formation, their gun ports open, their engines idling. The humans would read the document, look out at his fleet, and sign. That was how it always worked with civilizations like this. He had done his research, 3 years of it. Volkai intelligence had cataloged every human vessel registered with the Galactic Council, 42 cargo haulers, 17 science vessels, 8 small patrol ships with weapons too light to scratch a Volkai hull. Earth had no war fleet. In 60 years of galactic contact, humanity had never fired on another civilization. They attended summits. They traded spices and art. They gave long speeches about cooperation. They were, Gareth concluded, a civilization that had gotten lucky, sitting on a resource-rich system with no nearby predators. They had never learned to fight because they had never needed to. Now they would pay for that ignorance. Only one voice had disagreed. Ambassador Solis, senior Volkai diplomat, had submitted a formal objection the night before the fleet departed. He cited a single anomalous reading from a deep-range sensor pass, a thermal signature detected in Jupiter's orbital shadow 9 years ago, massive and briefly visible before it disappeared. The report had been filed, reviewed, and shelved. Solis called it the most important unresolved intelligence question in Volkai history. Gareth had called it a ghost reading from a malfunctioning probe. Solis had been permitted to join the fleet as an observer, since Gareth expected to need a diplomat for the formal surrender ceremony. He sat now in the rear observation bay of the command ship, the invoice document open on his screen, reading it for the 4th time. Something sat wrong in his chest. He could not name it. He closed the document and watched Jupiter instead, that enormous, striped giant sitting fat and quiet in the dark. The 6-hour deadline passed the bridge in silence. Gareth's communications officer waited. Nothing came. Then at the 4-minute mark, a response arrived. No video, just audio. A single human voice, female, very calm. "This is Admiral Dara Osai of the Earth Defense Fleet. We have received your document. We will not be signing it. We are also going to need the 6 hours for something else, so we appreciate the timeline. Please hold your position." Gareth stared at the speaker, as if it had insulted him personally. "Earth Defense Fleet," his intelligence officer repeated slowly. "There is no such designation in any council registry." "Because we never registered it," Osai's voice said. The channel was still open. She had known they would repeat the phrase aloud. "We are going to give you one opportunity to turn your fleet around. I want that noted in whatever record your people are keeping of this conversation." The offer was made. Gareth unmuted his side of the channel. "You have 8 patrol craft, Admiral. I have 400 warships. I admire the courage, but courage does not stop kinetic rounds." "No," she agreed, "it doesn't." The channel closed. Gareth looked at his tactical display. Earth sat peacefully below. Its cities glittered on the night side. Clouds moved across the day side in slow white spirals. No launches, no scrambling, no response from orbit. He watched for 10 minutes and nothing changed. He began to laugh, a short, disbelieving sound. "They're not doing anything," his tactical officer said. "Of course not, there's nothing to do." He leaned back in his chair. "Prepare boarding transports. We'll begin orbital approach in." "Commander," the sensor officer's voice had changed. It had dropped to something quiet and strange. "I'm reading. Contacts, Jupiter's shadow, multiple contacts." Gareth turned. "How many?" The officer did not answer immediately. He was recounting. His fingers moved across his screen 3 times, like he kept expecting the number to be wrong. Sir, I count 48 large-class signatures, mass readings consistent with capital ships. He looked up. Behind them, 300 smaller hulls, destroyer class and above. The bridge went silent. Gareth moved to the sensor screen himself. The shapes were emerging slowly from Jupiter's shadow, unhurried in tight formation, the way a fleet moves when it has nowhere it needs to run. Each dreadnought was enormous. Their hulls were dark and unmarked. They carried no alliance colors, no council registry tags, no broadcast identification. They had never needed any. They had never planned on being seen. At the system's edge, in a small neutral observation craft, Council Observer Tan pressed the button to begin his live transmission to the Galactic Council. His hand was shaking slightly. "This is Observer Tan, transmitting from Sol system." He paused, watching the shapes on his screen fill the frame. "I am not certain how to categorize what I am currently observing. I am going to keep this channel open and allow the Council to watch in real time." In the rear bay of the Volkai command ship, Ambassador Solis looked at Jupiter's shadow and said nothing at all. The thermal anomaly from 9 years ago was not a ghost. It had simply been waiting. The fleet that emerged did not look like something built in a hurry. It looked like something built in secret over decades by a civilization that had decided, very quietly, very patiently, that the day would eventually come. The Dreadnought did not feel like a warship from the inside. It felt like a city that had learned to move. The INS Unyielding was 2 kilometers long. Its corridors ran for miles beneath layered hull plating dense enough to stop anything the Galactic Council had ever classified as a standard weapon. Its reactors burned quiet and cold. Its crew of 4,000 moved through their stations with the ease of people who had trained for this moment for years, because they had. Every single one of them had. Captain Ren Aslani stood at the center of the bridge and did not speak. There was nothing to say yet. His crew knew their jobs. The pre-battle checks ran themselves, weapons officer confirming magnetic rail charge, point defense grids cycling through their test patterns, navigation locking the fleet's approach vector. Ren watched the Volkai formation on the main display and noted professionally that they had broken formation slightly. The ships on the outer edge had begun to drift. Shock did that to crews who were not trained for surprise. Lieutenant Priya Nair sat at the tactical console beside him and noted the same thing. "Their left flank is loose," she said quietly. "If they don't tighten up in the next 4 minutes, they'll have a gap we can use in the first pass." "They'll tighten up," Ren said. "Probably." She did not sound concerned either way. Admiral Osai's voice came across the fleet channel, calm, unhurried, like someone running a training exercise. "All ships, this is Osai. Formation hold until I give the advance order. Let them see us first. Give them time to understand what they're looking at. If any Volkai vessel turns and moves toward the jump corridor, you do not pursue. We are not here to chase them across the galaxy. We are here to defend our home." She paused. "That said, if they fire first, you answer completely." 48 dreadnoughts acknowledged. 300 support vessels followed. On the Volkai command ship, Gareth was no longer laughing. He stood at his tactical display and counted the human ships 3 times, the same way his sensor officer had. The math kept coming out the same. He pulled up the mass readings. Each of those dreadnoughts displaced more than his 2 largest warships combined. Their hull signatures were unlike anything in the Galactic Council's weapons registry. Whatever the humans had built, they had built it outside of any shared framework. "Get me a weapons analysis," he said. His weapons officer pulled up the spectral scan. "Rail systems, but the charge readings are." He stopped. "Commander, if those charge readings are accurate, the projectile velocity would be well above anything currently deployed by any council member." "That can't be right." "I'm reading it 3 times, it's consistent." Gareth looked at the formation on his screen. The human ships were holding position, not advancing. They were waiting. He had seen that tactic before, smaller civilizations trying to look confident while they bought time to call for help. But there was no help coming. Earth had no allies with a military force. He knew that. He had checked. He had not considered the possibility that Earth did not need help. "They're performing psychological pressure," he told his bridge crew. "Showing us their numbers and hopping we retreat. Standard bluff tactic for an under-equipped force." He said it clearly and firmly, the way commanders are supposed to say things they are not entirely sure they believe. At the edge of the system, Observer Tan had been transmitting for 11 minutes. The Galactic Council had pulled in every available relay to keep his feed live. 43 civilizations were watching. In chambers across the galaxy, representatives sat in silence, looking at the shape of the human fleet on their screens, cross-referencing against every database they had. Nothing matched. These ships were not in any registry. They had no designation. They had no history. They had simply appeared. Tan kept his voice steady with effort. "The human fleet continues to hold position. They have made no aggressive move. The Volkai fleet has also not fired. I am counting 48 human capital ships. For context, the largest military fleet currently registered with the Galactic Council, the Pithrani Defense Collective, maintains 31. These are not patrol vessels. The mass displacement alone classifies them as Dreadnought tier by any standard metric." He paused. "The Galactic Council has never classified humanity above a Class C civilization. I want that fact noted in this recording." In the Volkai rear bay, Solis had stopped watching his screen. He was watching Jupiter instead. He was thinking about the thermal reading from 9 years ago. He was thinking about how long that signature had been present before anyone noticed it. He was thinking about what it meant that humanity had kept 400 warships hidden in a gas giant's orbital shadow for what might have been decades, and never once hinted at it. Never bragged. Never threatened. Never even implied. A civilization that could keep a secret that large was a civilization that thought very carefully about everything it did. And a civilization that revealed that secret only after an invasion fleet arrived was a civilization that had been hopping, genuinely, patiently hopping, that it would never need to. Solis found that thought more frightening than the ships. On the Unyielding's bridge, Priya looked up from her screen. "Admiral Osa is giving the advance signal." Ren nodded. "Take us forward." The Unyielding moved. Behind it the fleet moved. 48 dreadnoughts and 300 warships began their approach in near-perfect silence, running lights off, engines at cruise, no rush, no fury. Just purpose. The Volkai fleet watched them come, and nobody on that bridge said a word. The first shot came from the Volkai. Gareth gave the order not because he believed it would work, but because doing nothing felt worse. 400 ships could not simply sit and watch an enemy approach. There was a crew behind him. There was a Dominion watching from home. A commander who did not fire when the enemy was in range was not a commander, he was a problem. So he fired. The Volkai broadside was enormous. Every ship in the formation launched simultaneously, thousands of plasma bolts and kinetic slugs filling the space between the two fleets in a wall of light and metal. It was the same opening strike that had ended 3 wars and cracked open 2 planetary defense grids. Against anything the Volkai had ever fought, it would have been enough to end the battle in the first exchange. Priya watched it coming on her screen and did not change her posture. "Point defense pattern 7, she said. "Shields to primary, rail interceptors online." The Unyielding's hull hummed. Along its flanks, hundreds of point defense turrets rotated and began firing at speeds no organic gunner could match, each one controlled by a targeting system that had been trained on exactly this kind of incoming fire for years. The plasma bolts hit the energy shield layer and bled out. The kinetic slugs that made it through the first layer met the rail interceptors. The few that survived both hit the hull and left scorch lines in the plating. The bridge did not shake. Ren looked at the damage report. hull integrity at 98%. 47 other ships reporting similar, Priya said. No critical damage across the fleet. In the Galactic Council relay, Observer Tan described what he was watching in a voice that had gone very flat and careful. The Volkai fired a full fleet broadside. The human fleet absorbed it. I am reading minimal damage across the human formation. I want to be precise about what I just said. 400 ships fired simultaneously, and the humans absorbed it with what appears to be minimal structural impact. Then the humans fired back. It was not a broadside. It was not a dramatic wall of energy. It was a single coordinated volley from the Dreadnought line, measured, targeted, deliberate. Each rail cannon fired one round at one specific ship. The projectiles crossed the distance between the fleets in under 2 seconds. 11 Volkai ships stopped existing. Not damaged, not crippled. The rail rounds hit at velocities the Volkai shielding was never designed to handle, punching through plating that had never been breached in any prior engagement, and the ships simply came apart. The debris spread in slow, expanding clouds. The plasma bore cannons followed, 4 shots, 4 more ships gone, 2 more reduced to drifting hulks. Gareth's bridge was silent for 3 full seconds. 15 ships, his tactical officer said. He sounded like a man reading his own death sentence. In the first exchange, we lost 15 ships in the first exchange. Gareth had lost ships before. Every commander had. But those losses came after sustained engagement, after hours of fighting, after shields failed slowly and hulls gave under repeated hammering. He had never lost 15 ships in the opening seconds of a battle. He had never fought an enemy that opened with precision instead of power, that selected targets like a surgeon instead of swinging like a hammer. "Return fire," he said. His voice was steady. He was proud of that. The second Volkai volley came. The humans absorbed it the same way they had absorbed the first, methodically, quietly, without panic. The point defense grids chewed through the incoming fire, and the shields handled the rest. When the exchange cleared, the unyielding had taken 3 direct hull impacts. Ren looked at the readings. 94% integrity, Priya reported. We're fine. The human return volley was slightly larger this time. 18 ships. Gareth gripped the edge of his console. 33 vessels gone in 2 exchanges. His fleet still had 360, but the number was falling in a way that felt different from normal battle losses. Normal losses were spread across a fight. These were being removed, calmly, efficiently, like a crew clearing debris. "They're targeting," his weapons officer said. "They're not targeting our strongest ships. They're targeting our communication relays, our fleet coordination vessels. They're dismantling our ability to coordinate, not just destroying ships." Gareth had not noticed that. He looked at the map and saw it immediately. The humans were not hitting randomly. They were hitting the nervous system of his fleet, the vessels that carried his order relay, the ships that managed his formation coherence. Each hit was a message. "We understand how your fleet works, and we are taking it apart from the inside." "This isn't their full firepower," his weapons officer added quietly. "They haven't committed their full broadside yet." Gareth looked at his fleet and understood something that no intelligence report had prepared him for. The humans were not fighting to destroy his ships as fast as possible. They were fighting to demonstrate something. They were showing him exactly how this would end, step by step, so that he would know, when it was over, that it had never been close. On the rear bay feed, Solis watched the exchange and covered his mouth with one hand. Somewhere in the Galactic Council chambers, a very old Pithrani general, the one who commanded the largest registered military fleet in the galaxy, turned to his aide and said quietly, "Tell me we have never done anything to anger these people." His aide checked the records. "We haven't, sir." "Good," the general said. "Let's keep it that way." Gareth tried everything. He was not a bad commander. He had won 7 engagements across his career. He understood tactics, fleet movement, the psychology of battle. He pulled from every doctrine his military had ever written and threw it at the human formation with the desperation of a man who knows he is losing, but refuses to accept the shape of it. First, he tried swarming. He broke his remaining 300 ships into 6 groups and sent them at the human fleet from different angles simultaneously. The theory was sound: spread the enemy's defensive attention, force them to split their fire, find a weak point in the coverage. It had broken 2 stronger formations in prior Volkai engagements. The human destroyers peeled away from the main line before the swarm groups were halfway through their approach. They moved like a single organism, no hesitation, no confusion in the formation, every ship knowing exactly where to go before the order could have possibly reached them. Each human destroyer intercepted one Volkai swarm group and tore through it with rail fire and close-range plasma bursts. The main Dreadnought line did not slow down. It did not even adjust. The destroyers handled the swarm problem entirely on their own, and then returned to formation as if nothing had interrupted them. Gareth lost 60 ships in 8 minutes. He tried the gravity sling. It was an old tactic, rarely used because it required careful positioning, but effective when it worked. He sent 40 vessels on a wide arc toward Jupiter, using the gas giant's gravity well to accelerate them into a high-speed attack trajectory, a curve that would bring them in behind the human fleet, outside the main Dreadnought's firing arc. By the time the humans could turn to face the attack, the Volkai ships would already be inside their defensive perimeter. He had spent 3 years mapping Sol's system. He knew Jupiter's orbital mechanics precisely. The humans, apparently, had spent 60 years doing the same thing. Interceptors were already waiting at every viable gravity-assist exit point, pre-positioned, sitting still in the dark, engines cold, invisible until the Volkai ships came around Jupiter's curve and flew directly into them. The 40 vessels were destroyed before they could complete the attack arc. Not one of them reached the human rear line. Gareth stared at his display. They mapped every possible gravity trajectory from Jupiter. "It appears so, sir," his navigation officer said. "How long would that take?" Nobody answered. The implication was obvious to everyone on the bridge. He tried to close the distance. His hull-breaching torpedoes were devastating at close range, the one weapon in his arsenal that could reliably punch through heavy shielding if the delivery vessels survived long enough to fire. The plan was simple: push his heaviest remaining ships forward at full speed, accept losses during the approach, and get inside the Dreadnought's optimal firing range where the big rail cannons were less effective and the close-range brawl could give him an advantage. The Dreadnoughts did not retreat. They did not adjust their formation. They simply changed their weapons mix. The rail cannon stepped down and the point defense grid extended outward, and the approaching Volkai heavy ships found themselves running through a corridor of interceptor fire so dense that 3 of them broke apart before they reached half-distance. The rest pulled back. "They planned for this too," his weapons officer said. "It was not a question." "They planned for everything," Gareth said. He had one option left. It was not a military option. It was a threat, and he knew the difference, but he was past the point where the difference mattered. Deep in his fleet's reserve were 12 antimatter drones. They were planet killers, not designed for fleet combat but for what came after fleet combat, when the winning side wanted to make sure the losing side never fought again. They were illegal under Galactic Council treaties that Volkai had signed but never believed they would need to honor. They were, in every sense, an atrocity waiting for a desperate enough moment. He was desperate enough. "Launch the reserve package," he said. His weapons officer looked at him, a long look, then he entered the command. 12 drones launched from the fleet's rear line, accelerating toward the inner system, toward Earth. On the unyielding, an alert appeared on Priya's screen. She read it once, then she looked at Ren. "Antimatter drones, 12 of them, planet killer class." Ren looked at her. Time to inner system. At their current speed, 18 minutes. He opened the Admiral's channel. Admiral Osai, we have antimatter drones inbound. 12 units, planet killer designation. Osai's voice came back immediately. I see them. Priya, what's your intercept solution? Priya had already run it. We can take all 12 before they reach the inner system boundary. 40 seconds of work. Do it. Priya began working. Her hands moved across her console with the focused ease of someone running a drill they had done 400 times. Target locks acquired. Intercept firing solution calculated. She did not rush. She did not need to. Firing, she said. 40 seconds later, 12 expanding clouds of debris drifted in the dark between Mars and the asteroid belt. Not one drone had crossed the inner system boundary. Gareth received the intercept report. He set it down on the console in front of him. He looked at what remained of his fleet, less than half of what he had arrived with. He looked at the human formation, which had not lost a single ship. He looked at the antimatter intercept report and understood that the humans had not scrambled to meet that threat. They had noted it, planned a solution, and handled it in under a minute. He had nothing left. For the first time since the battle began, Supreme Commander Gareth had absolutely nothing left to try. The Volkai fleet broke. Not all at once. First, the outer ships turned, the ones farthest from Gareth's command vessel, the ones whose captains had done the math on their own and arrived at the same answer. Then the middle ships followed. Then, finally, the command ship itself turned toward the jump corridor. 340 ships had arrived at Sol. Less than 200 were leaving. Admiral Osai watched them go. She did not pursue. She gave the order once and it was followed without question. The human fleet held position, watching the Volkai remnants accelerate toward the jump point, and did nothing to stop them. Ren stood at his display and watched the retreating signatures thin out. Priya sat back in her chair and let out a long, slow breath, the first sign of tension she had shown during the entire engagement. We're letting them leave, she said. It was not a complaint, it was an observation. Yes, Ren said. Some of those crews will rebuild, come back. Maybe, Ren said, that's tomorrow's problem. Osai's voice came across the fleet channel. All ships hold position, weapons to standby, prepare for broadcast, I'm opening the full spectrum channel. Every ship acknowledged. Then the channel went quiet and every crew in the human fleet listened. Osai opened a transmission to Observer Tan's relay, the same feed that had been broadcasting to the Galactic Council for the past 2 hours. She did not clear her throat. She did not use a formal title. She just spoke. This is Admiral Dara Osai. I am transmitting to the Galactic Council and to anyone else who has been watching today's engagement. I want to speak plainly, because I think plain language is what this moment requires. She paused for exactly 2 seconds. Humanity has been part of this galactic community for 60 years. In that time, we attended every summit. We signed every trade agreement. We sat in the rear seats at the council chambers and we spoke carefully and we tried, genuinely, to build something good out of the contact we had with other civilizations. We were dismissed. We were overlooked. We were mapped by intelligence scouts who filed reports describing us as a non-threat. And we said nothing. Another pause. We were not silent because we were weak. We were silent because we were watching. Every war in this galaxy for 60 years, we studied it. Every weapon system, every tactical doctrine, every mistake made by every fleet that ever lost an engagement. We learned, and we built, not because we wanted war. We built because we understood, in a way that only a species with our particular history could understand, that peace is something you protect, and protection requires capability. Observer Tan had stopped narrating. He was just transmitting. The feed was live across 43 civilizations, and every single one of those watching chambers was silent. Today the Volkai Dominion sent 400 ships to our home with a document demanding we sign away our system. They gave us 6 hours. We used the time well. A brief beat. The Volkai fleet is retreating. We have not pursued them. We will not pursue them. This is not a war of conquest. This is a response to one. The survivors will return to their dominion. They will tell their leadership what they saw. That is the intended outcome. She let that settle. This transmission is also for every other civilization that has ever pulled up a file on Earth and seen a resource-rich system with a quiet, cooperative, apparently defenseless civilization sitting on top of it. I want that file updated today. We are not defenseless. We have never been defenseless. We were extending good faith to a community we wanted to be part of, and we were repaid with calculation and contempt. Her voice did not harden, it stayed level. That was somehow worse than anger. We are still willing to be good members of this community. We are still willing to trade, to cooperate, to attend summits and sign agreements and work towards something better. That offer remains open, but we will no longer be polite about what we are. We are a military civilization. We are a capable one, and our patience, while very long, is not infinite. She closed the channel. In the council chambers, no one spoke for almost a full minute. Then, slowly, conversations began, urgent, hushed, the sound of 43 civilizations recalculating everything. The P-Thrani general had already started drafting a formal diplomatic communique to Earth. The Seldry Trade Collective, which had quietly been planning to propose unfair extraction terms at the next trade summit, shelved that proposal permanently. 3 civilizations with active border disputes near human space began very careful reviews of their territorial claims. In the observation bay of the broken Volkai command ship, Solis sat with his hands folded in his lap and watched the human fleet on the display. 200 warships, 48 dreadnoughts, holding position around a planet that had never asked for trouble. He thought about the invoice. 12 pages of legal text, formatted carefully, delivered through proper channels. Gareth had been proud of it. He thought about what it had cost. He opened his personal log and began to type, because someone in the Volkai Dominion needed to read an honest account of what had happened here, and he did not trust anyone else to write it. He started with a simple line. We were not defeated by their weapons. We were defeated by our assumption. We looked at a civilization that chose not to fight and told ourselves it was a civilization that could not fight. Those are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. I wrote this in a report 9 years ago and no one listened. He paused, then added one more line. Someone should have listened. 3 months was not a long time, but the galaxy changed fast when it had a reason to. The Volkai Reparations Treaty was signed in 6 weeks. Gareth had been removed from command before the fleet even completed its retreat, a decision made not out of principle but out of political survival. The Volkai High Council needed someone to blame who was not themselves, and Gareth had obligingly handed them every reason. The treaty was not gentle. Earth's diplomatic team had written it, and they had written it with the patience of people who had been preparing for this conversation for decades. Ambassador Solis represented the Volkai side. He signed it without argument. He had written his report. Some people had read it, not enough but some. Admiral Os flew to the Galactic Council summit on a standard transport ship, unescorted, without weapons. This was a deliberate choice and everyone understood it as one. She did not need an escort. The galaxy knew that now. The absence of one was its own kind of message. We are here to talk, and we do not need guns at a summit because anyone considering a problem will have already thought through the consequences. The council chamber had been rearranged. Osai's seat was at the central table. Nobody announced this change or explained it. It had simply happened, the way things happen when 43 civilizations spend 3 months quietly revising their understanding of a situation. She sat down and looked around the chamber. There were faces she recognized from years of summits, the P-Thrani delegation in their layered formal robes, the Seldry representatives with their translator clusters, the Rune Collective who had never once acknowledged a human speaker at any prior meeting. The Rune delegate looked at her now and gave a small, careful nod. She nodded back. The session was long and covered expected ground, reparations framework, registration of Earth's fleet with the Council's military registry, formal classification review. When the clerk read out the proposed new classification, Class A military civilization, first changed to the list in 90 years, there was no objection. There was barely any discussion. The vote was unanimous. After the session, the Pithrani general found her in the corridor. He was older than she had expected from his broadcasts, and he walked with the slight slowness of someone who had spent too many years in high-gravity environments. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I want an honest answer, not a diplomatic one." "I'll try," she said. "Could you have shown us this earlier? Could humanity have revealed this fleet at any point in the last 30 years? She considered the question seriously. "Yes." "Why didn't you?" "Because we didn't want to," she said. "Once you show a fleet like that, the conversation changes. Everyone starts treating you differently. Some civilizations start fearing you. Some start trying to build something that can match you. A few start thinking about whether it's worth hitting you before you hit them. We liked the conversation we were having. We liked being the civilization that people didn't worry about." She paused. "We were wrong to think that being unthreatening would protect us. The Voikai proved that, but we weren't wrong about what revealing would cost." The general thought about this, and now the conversation has changed, she said. "We'll manage." He nodded slowly and walked away. Back on the Unyielding, which had returned to its standard patrol route through the outer system, Ren was doing a walkthrough of the ship, not an inspection, just a walk. He did this sometimes. The ship was too large to know entirely, but he liked trying. The crew he passed nodded or waved. Nobody stood at attention. The Unyielding was not that kind of ship. He stopped at the bow observation deck. The stars ahead were very bright this far from Earth's light pollution. He stood there for a few minutes, just watching. Priya arrived without announcement and stood beside him. This was also something she did sometimes. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what comes next." "Patrols," he said, "treaty compliance monitoring, the usual." "I mean bigger than that now that everyone knows." She was quiet for a moment. "Before we were a secret. Secrets are simple. Now we're a fact. Facts are complicated." "Facts are what they are," he said. "That's a very unhelpful answer." "I know," he almost smiled. "But it's true. We didn't change. The galaxy's understanding of us changed. We're the same thing we were before the battle. We just got seen." She looked at the stars. "Do you think it'll hold the peace?" "For a while," he said. "And when it doesn't?" He considered it. "Then we come back out from behind Jupiter." She made a quiet sound, not quite a laugh. Then she was still again. The ship moved beneath them, slow and massive, covering the distance between stars at cruise speed. The darkness outside was enormous and the stars were very far apart. On Earth, Admiral Osai sat in her office at the Defense Ministry and looked at the framed copy of the new Council classification on her wall. Class A military civilization. 60 years of patience distilled into a plaque. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked out the window at the sky, blue in the afternoon, fading to deep dark at the edge of the atmosphere where space began. Somewhere up there, her fleet was moving. Somewhere further, other fleets were also moving, recalculating, repositioning. The galaxy was learning a new fact about humanity. Humanity, meanwhile, was learning something harder, that being seen carried weight. That strength without restraint was threat, and threat without wisdom was just war waiting for a reason. She turned back to her desk. There was a great deal of work to do. There always was.